Hello, I'm Judy Stiles. Thank you for joining us this week on Newsmakers. When you think about air pollution, you often think of perhaps big cities, concerns of larger metropolitan areas. However, it's something that the Joplin region is looking more closely at. Today we're going to find out about that by visiting with Dan Pekarek with the Joplin Health Department, who's been working with an organization really concerned about ozone in the region. Thank you for being here today.
I'm very happy to be here.
We think about, as I said, air pollution. Why, people might want to say at the beginning of the program, why is Joplin concerned about air pollution and ozone?
Well, that was about the same reaction we had about 3 years ago. We became aware of some data that indicated that the Joplin metro area was very close to becoming in what is called non-attainment, or in other words, to be out of compliance with the federal air quality standards for ozone, for ground level ozone. Mm-hmm. So it was a little bit of a shock to us to think of a small metro area like Joplin to be potentially out of compliance with that air quality standard.
So you have an organization, and you're working with the Four-State Clean Air Alliance group.
Right. Shortly after that awareness, we have that awareness, we started working. We also participate with a local group called the Environmental Task Force. That group has been in place since the 1990s. It started out working with the Superfund cleanup, the EPA Superfund cleanup in the area, and has continues to work with that, but now works with other issues, water quality, air quality issues. So the Environmental Task Force kind of took it up as an issue to look at. Eventually started meeting with the Joplin Area Transportation Study Organization, or JATSO, and they kind of are the lead agency in these kind of issues. Mm-hmm. They are the group in the area that helps to make decisions, make recommendations on how to spend federal and state transportation dollars.
And this is a regional approach.
And this is a regional approach, mm-hmm. and so those kind of agencies, those organizations like that deal with transportation issues are heavily impacted by ozone issues. So if you have an area that becomes a non-attainment, for instance, the dollars that flow into a community can mm-hmm. be affected for transportation.
So they have a real concern.
They have a real concern. So we actually had some earlier meetings with them, and came up with an agreement that the Environmental Task Force would kind of head up this issue, and from that the Environmental Task Force appointed the Four-State Clean Air Alliance, and here we are. Now there's a group of individuals that are working on this issue specifically. And of
course, you're representing the Joplin Health Department, but it's more than just health officials. You have quite a variety of people involved with the Alliance.
Right. The group, and I think rightly so, has a very broad representation: business, industry, mm-hmm. Local government, state government, federal government. But we have health officials, hospital representation, so you name it. We've got small business, large business, industry, all represented at the table to try to make some decisions about how to proceed.
Great. Well, let's go back, and we talked about attaining certain levels of ozone. So Joplin, I guess nationwide, people have been monitoring ozone levels for years.
Right. Ground level ozone is one of the 6 items that are monitored at the federal level, mm-hmm. As far as air quality for any given community. And ground level ozone, again, is one of those items. It's been monitored for many years, and the ground level ozone actually has come down nationwide substantially over the last, say, 20 years. A lot of that is due to various federal regulations that have been put in place over the years. Some of those, for instance, the more efficient cars,
all this air pollution
less air pollution from the engines. That's had a significant impact on ground level ozone. But some of the larger industries, electrical generation, those kind of things have had more regulations placed on them, mm-hmm. where they've cleaned up what's coming out of
the smokestacks we used to see are being changed.
So those things all combined over the last 20 years or so have really dropped the ground level ozone level.
So the monitoring 3 years ago said something you need to really start worrying about Joplin.
Right.
So
while the level has gone down significantly over the many years, it's still at a level now where we're just about, actually in the last couple of years, we have been out of compliance with the federal standard. Mm-hmm. And so that's why we decided we wanted to really get this group together and start looking at this issue, kind of be proactive, rather than reactive. Because there are consequences if a community becomes in a non-attainment status, and we want to try to avoid those. Other than, the obvious from my perspective are health conditions, mm-hmm. But there are other consequences for a community.
So when people are looking around and they think of communities where they're affected already, we think of maybe a St. Louis where they have ozone concerns and special emission inspections for cars, special equipment on gasoline pumps, and those are communities where the government has said, you've got to do something.
Yeah, those are examples where regulations have kicked in, and they've had to do things that were mandated to do things. And obviously, you know, from our perspective, we'd like to be able to get ahead of this and try to reduce those levels in the community, in the area, so that we don't end up under the gun, if you will, in a situation where things are mandated upon us.
Right. Well, I know one of the first things you've been doing is getting, like we're doing today, educating the public, making people aware that you have some public service announcements, which we started airing, I believe, last fall, and a lot of people have seen them on other stations as well. And if our crew in the back has the public service announcement ready, I'd like to cue that up and let you have a chance to kind of look at one of the messages being sent out regarding this issue.
Are you an air breather? Of course you are, so this message is for you. Ozone in the upper atmosphere protects us from the sun's ultraviolet rays, but at ground level it's harmful to our health and the environment. Ground level ozone is formed when volatile organic compounds and nitrogen oxides react in the atmosphere with sunlight and heat. Since it needs these to form, it's mainly a concern April through October. On hot, still summer days, ozone is at its worst. To learn more, visit summerair.org. Are you an air breather? Of course you are. I'd guess you'd like to save money too. Here are 3 easy steps to reduce your energy use, save money, and help the air we breathe. Turn up your thermostat. Even 1 degree can result in significant savings on your energy bills. When it's time to replace your appliances, look for Energy Star. Unplug. Most electronics still use electricity when in standby mode. Follow these easy steps to save money and help repair our summer air. To learn more, visit summerair.org.
Well, as we could see by the spots that we aired, a lot of it's focusing on summer, and I guess does that have to do with the heat of the year and just the nature of how ozone's handled in the heat?
Exactly. Ground level ozone is the biggest concern during the spring and summer months, those hotter, you know, dry, still days of summer around here. Right now, the ozone season for our area is April to October. Although EPA, there are some new regulations that are being considered right now that would extend that a little bit into March, for instance. But right now, it's April to October. We're most concerned, and you're really going to see those increases on those really hot, still summer days. Right. That's when you have the volatile organic compounds that are being emitted from certain functions, and the nitrous oxides that are also being emitted. Those two what we call precursors to ground level ozone mix together on a nice hot summer day with some sunlight and nice high heat, and you get the ground level ozone formation.
You're almost like cooking it up together to cause that problem.
Exactly, that's a good analogy.
Kind of tying that together. So looking at trying to get the word out and what people can do, those spots mentioned, the last one we saw, some tips that people can do. And, you know, talking about turning up your thermostat. Just so a lot of it's perhaps changing some habits people already have.
Right, and that's why the community education component of our plan, and we had that 4-State Clean Air Alliance actually developed a community plan. Right. And one of the components of that has to do with community education. And it's because it's all those little things that we all can do that can add up cumulatively to make a difference on the ground level ozone level. You know, you don't think about, well, if I turn up my thermostat a degree in the summer, if I mow my yard in the morning or the evening rather than the heat of the day, if I fill my car up with gasoline first thing in the morning or later in the evening, you know, if I do those little things, does it really make a difference? Well, one individual maybe not, but 20,000, 40,000 individuals, you know, it makes a difference. And so all those little things, as the spot talked about, you know, but beyond that, you know, the volatile organics are things, when you think about those, you were talking about gasoline, you know, solvents, those kind of things. Right. So when you've got all those things that you've got out in your garage and you're painting or you're doing something, you know, following the directions, making sure to keep the lids capped tightly, don't spill those kind of things. All those kind of things can add up.
So it's the individual homeowners, the individual people, as well as the corporate side. You talk about businesses and so forth being aware of this. It's a community effort.
And you know, to a large extent, the businesses they've already been regulated. You know, they've already received those regulations and have been under those regulations to try to reduce nitrous oxide and volatile organics emissions for a long time. So a lot of this campaign, and those things are going to continue to go on, But a lot of this campaign has to do with trying to educate the average individual, maybe the small business owner, those kinds of things.
Right. So we'll see much more of that education being continuing to be an effort of what you're doing. So continuing to monitor the ozone and the results is something that I imagine continuous communication when the season comes around. You're working with the EPA, finding out what their reports are and where you're standing at.
Right. There's actually a monitor that's in our area. We've had one since 2009. There was one that was a little bit further from us that really didn't give us good indication of what was actually going on in the metro area. But there's been a monitor that was put in place in 2009 here in the metro area. So that gives us a much better idea what our ground level ozone levels are. There are a few monitors scattered throughout the area, but that's the one that's closest to us, and that gives us the best idea. And we do monitor that on a daily basis now. We get that information from DNR.
Of course, we're talking area, excuse me, our television station as far as reaches throughout the region, and I'm sure you've mentioned regional. How big of a region are we talking working together with this program?
Well, the initial focus area of the Alliance is Jasper and Newton counties. That's the official designation for the metropolitan area. But we know, I mean, this is an air issue, and air blows with the wind.
Right, it's not going to hang over Joplin.
Right. So we are looking at those areas to the south and to the west of us as well. So we started out with our focus area of Jasper and Newton counties. We're also looking further south, though, at McDonald County and all the way down to Benton County, Arkansas. We're also looking into Ottawa County, Oklahoma, and Cherokee County, Kansas.
Okay.
Because the Joplin metro area, we're downwind of those areas. So whatever happens there on a good hot summer day is blowing our way, and from our area downwind of us.
Go on to the next people up the road.
Right. Everybody points downhill on this issue. So we will be, our campaign will be reaching out and has already started reaching out to those areas to see if we can't get representation on the board, so that we have a way of communicating back and forth with those areas about, hey, we're doing this, can you do that, these kind of things there as well. Media, obviously, as you mentioned, goes well beyond just Jasper and Newton County. What's produced here, a lot of people will hear. So that's a big focus of the education campaign.
Right. And you talked about, the individuals, even something like mowing your grass. Explain, for someone, well, what does it mean to be able to push my mower in the morning instead of in the middle of the daytime?
Well,
not only the fact that it's cooler, but
yeah, well, that's the main thing. Lawnmowers, individual small lawnmowers, actually are a big emitter of the constituents that form ground level ozone, because there's not a lot of pollution control devices on a small gasoline engine. So, and it's the high heat time of the day when you have that greatest cooking, you said earlier, and that's a very good way of putting it. Those really high heat times of the day when that cooking is going on for the most, the most part.
All those chemicals reacting in the fumes.
So it's better to do those kind of activities. They're going to be outside activities during the early morning or in the evening, so that there's not as much of the VOCs and the NOx out there floating around the atmosphere to be able to make ground level ozone.
Right. Well, you mentioned being downwind or downstream from certain areas, so sometimes the pollution that you're monitoring in Joplin isn't necessarily generated in Joplin. You're getting something coming up the highway, basically.
That could be, and that's an issue that we are, as an alliance, we're looking at, and we're having those conversations with the Department of Natural Resources. There's a term called transport in the ozone business, and it has to do with what is happening above you that's blowing down to you, and it's being transported to you. So with something like ground level ozone, that can be a real issue. And we can do all these little things that we're talking about doing in our community, but at the end of the day, there's still going to be the chance that something's coming to us that we have no control over. So that's a real challenge. We still have to do what we can do, and frankly, if we know that we are in it just geographically and meteorologically, the way Joplin is situated, we believe that we do have a lot of transport issues. When you compare us to Springfield on a nice hot summer day, our levels many times are higher in Joplin than they are in Springfield, a community of 3 times our size. So we do believe that transport is an issue in Joplin, and I think the DNR does also believe that. We're actually waiting for some new data from them. They're doing some modeling data that's going to help to show maybe where our issues are coming from. So you got Northwest Arkansas just south of us, you got Tulsa, Oklahoma City metro areas just south and west of us, and all that's coming our way on a good hot summer day.
Because when you're out in your yard and that wind's blowing from the southwest, it's bringing in that type of fume, and then it hangs over the city. And you've mentioned DNR and the EPA, so there's a lot of agencies, federal, state, local, involved in this type of effort as well.
Right, and we actually, when we formed the alliance, while we are a local alliance, we have heavy on the local emphasis on that board, on the folks that are on that board. we did invite, for instance, representation from the State Department of Natural Resources and from the EPA so that we can get their input, very quickly and not have to wait for answers. We hopefully will have somebody that's either at the meeting or on the conference call with the meeting so that we can try to get answers when we have, questions but we do try to keep them involved so that we can not only for us to get information from them, but they can hear what we're doing down here.
Right. And of course, with the health department, I'm sure health concerns are the primary area of emphasis. People might be wondering, well, what are some of the health concerns you have with increased ozone? How does that affect the human?
Well, obviously, they're worse the higher the levels are. And thankfully, our levels aren't terribly high. I mean, we've been bouncing that 75 parts per billion level now for the last few years, a little bit less the last couple of years. So we're not in a really high, I guess we're considered more of a moderate level. Those communities that are in the 80s, 90s, parts per billion, those are much more of a concern. But still yet, ozone tends to affect those individuals, especially at the levels that we have, that might be otherwise already affected in a respiratory fashion. So maybe they've got COPD, they've got asthma, they have some sort of a respiratory disease already. And so those individuals are going to be probably more apt to feel the effects, shortness of breath. They can have just irritation of the mucus, the lining of the lungs, respiratory tract, things of that nature. And it can affect them the most. Very young, the very old, individuals that spend a lot of time outside in the hot summertime working, they would be the ones that probably are going to feel the effects more than the average citizen.
Right. Well, you mentioned improvements in the United States, but we've seen those pictures on the news in the summertime. Maybe in China, I know last year they had some problems. People walking around with masks on because of their high air pollution.
We hope we
levels.
don't get to that, ever get to that state.
That in the United States.
Yeah, I mean, those are significant impacts from a multitude of directions. I mean, there's smog,
kind of the extreme,
and there's ozone. I mean, that ozone is part of what they're dealing with, but those are also other issues that they're dealing with, their heavy particulate levels and things. But, we do know that we're bumping that level where we're going to be out of compliance. We know we need to get ahead of that if we can. Even if we do have transport issues, we still know we need to do what we can locally because we can't control the transport, so we need to do what we can to drop our level ourselves.
And ozone is something that people can't look out the window and say, oh, looks like there's a lot of ozone in the air today.
Yeah, you're not going to see it as well. I mean, to some extent you can see a little bit of, you can see air quality, some indication of that.
A little bit of a haze on a hot summer day.
But a lot of that is just moisture in the atmosphere. It's very humid, or so it's very hard to know that the ozone level is really there or not. And that's one of the things that you struggle with in this, because it's if you don't see it, you can see water pollution a lot of times. Sometimes you can't; it's dissolved to the extent that you can't see it. But a lot of times you can see the effects of it in the water. Right. You can see trash. Somebody, trash
on the side of the road.
But it's very hard to see this issue. So it's hard for people to understand it. That's why we have to rely on those monitors and that monitor data to be able to show people, okay, look, today it's 75 parts per billion, or 78 parts per billion, or whatever. We need it to be down at 65 parts per billion. So we have to rely on that.
Part of your education being helping people understand that language of the ozone levels.
Right. And if you've ever been in some of the big cities, you'll hear people talk about, maybe on the news, they'll come on in the morning and say, this is a high alert ozone day.
Right, this is an orange day, or so they have color codes.
Some of the larger cities do that. And we would like to be able to maybe get to the ability to put that information out to individuals that this could be a day that could be a problem. That may be one of the things that we work towards.
So just helping people to be able to visualize when you're talking about those health concerns.
Right. Generally speaking, we're talking about those hot, humid, still days.
So we're in the middle of the wintertime as we're recording this program. What can people be doing now to prepare for the spring? What would you recommend for people?
Well, I think just the main thing, number one, getting educated, learning about the things that you can do next, come April, that you can do around your own home. But getting your air conditioning serviced now so that it's going to be efficiently running in the summer months, making sure your car is tuned up now before you get to the summer months. The lawnmower is tuned up and running fine. Do all those little things to kind of make sure that everything is efficient as it can be as you get into the spring and summer months when you need to start using those items.
Now, the other side of the coin, if you're non-compliant, what can the government do then? If how many times do you have to be non-compliant? How do those regulations start kicking in?
Well, that's kind of fluid.
Okay.
It's hard to get a real straight answer, but we do know if you've ever lived in a very large city. We were talking earlier about St. Louis. They have the little boots on the gas pumps. You know,
Right.
you tend to see those. If you go to get your car inspected, you have to do an emissions test as well. So there are certainly some things that EPA can mandate upon a community that causes individuals some hassle.
And expense. I mentioned those
And
emission
expense,
tests cost extra for
right.
people.
But there's also an expense in the community from the standpoint, you know, from the health, you know, issues.
Right, people
If
getting
you have individuals with asthma, that they're going to maybe have more asthma events. They may spend more time in the emergency room. So there's that kind of a situation. But it can have an expense on the local business and industry. If you've got, you know, one community that's in attainment and another community that's not in attainment, and they're both competing for the same business, that could be an effect on the decision-making process of that industry before they make it, you know, where do I want to go to?
So the economic development and growth of a community affected.
In transportation dollars, we talked about that earlier, they could be affected by an area being non-attainment. So there's a lot of reasons for us to try to get ahead of this issue, if at all possible.
Now, earlier you mentioned transportation, and we're seeing in the Joplin region more things like roundabouts and so forth. Are those also designed not only for traffic flow, but maybe to slow down that time you have to sit there with your engine idling, waiting for the light to change?
Yeah, and in our plan, I mean, we've got kind of 4 different goal areas, and one of the goal areas has to do with transportation, because that is such a key area for ozone production. And we actually would, as a group, we would actually support those kinds of things. You know, something. Wait a minute, you're supporting the construction of something that, you know, causes people to drive. Well, yes, but it's causing people to drive more efficiently. If the roundabout reduces the time that we have cars idling, then that's a good thing for the community. Improvements, certainly some of the things like here in Joplin on West 26th Street, they just did that new project and just opened it up, and you'll notice it has bike lanes on both sides. It has the center turn lane, so you don't have people stopping, waiting to turn, people stacked up behind them waiting to turn. Now you can get off of the traffic flow, you're in a left turn lane, there isn't all the other traffic stopping and getting stopped and sitting there idling. The bike lanes, you know, obviously non-vehicle traffic is a good thing.
So you're not polluting riding your
Right.
bicycle.
If you're riding your bike, there's sidewalks so people can walk. So those are all good things from a perspective of ozone reduction. Public transportation, using the trolley, those are all good things as far as reducing ozone production in the community.
So we'll probably see more of those types of approaches in our community and tying things
We
together.
certainly are going to support that, and we'll, you know, we attend the JATSO meetings on a regular basis, and we try to encourage them when they're spending those federal and state transportation dollars to spend those kind of dollars on those kind of projects.
Now we're talking today, if people want more information, you have a website and some available information where they can find
Right,
things?
thesummer-air.org is the very simple, easy thing to remember. If you go there, you're going to be able to find all of our latest PSAs, just basic information, tips about what you can do around your house. We'll try to have more information there as the summer gets closer about the actual ozone levels that are occurring.
So you'll post those on a regular basis?
It's something. It's a little bit of a challenge because the data that comes into from the testing site at just north and east of Joplin has to be validated, has to be quality assured by the DNR before they release it. So there's a bit of a delay
kind of a
time
lag
before
into
we
what
can
you're
get. But
seeing.
that's something we'd like to be able to do, is at least let that information be available to individuals. It is available on their website, but it's not validated yet.
Okay. And we saw briefly the website on the screen for people to recognize that, and kind of your little logo with the young little cartoon character getting the message across.
Somebody, I don't remember how we got, somebody named him Roger. I don't know how that came about. But,
Roger to help with the reduction of ozone. Well, as we're looking toward the future and Joplin region, years down the road, obviously you want to be in compliance, but this is going to be a continuing challenge for the community. You've had a couple good years, as you said, but we've got to keep having good years.
Right. We hope for a nice, cool summer again this year. The parks director always says, "No, I don't." He wants people to
go to the pool and be hot.
Go to the pool. But he and I have a running battle about that. But yeah, this isn't something that goes away. As a community grows, you know, more traffic, more business, and more things going on, this is going to be an issue. You know, again, there's going to be new federal regulations that come out that make cars more efficient, make them more clean as they drive. More regulations upon industry to make them more clean. But we are going to have to, as individuals, we're going to have to continue to do the things that we're talking about doing just to keep ourselves in compliance.
Great. So really from a perspective of a homeowner or an individual, do things voluntarily before the government forces
Absolutely.
Regulations on you.
It's always better to be proactive.
Before someone says you can't use your lawnmower because it's polluting,
right.
and tying things together. So well, it sounds like a lot of the people working together on this topic. We'll continue to hear more about it, follow up on what people can do. And I know we've seen stories in the media as you've been making these plans. You have plans for more than education as we go into the summer months.
Right. We'll be more active the closer we get to the summer months, doing more of these kind of things. Just trying to get the information out to the public as many formats as we can.
Right. And our community has so many, especially Joplin, we hear about so many visitors to the community, that we have a daytime population and a nighttime population. So that probably impacts us as well. So many
no doubt. I mean, the population, goes from, 50,000 at night to 250,000, 220,000 during the day. And so, yeah, I mean, and then that's a lot of that are people driving to Joplin for medical care, for jobs, for school, what have you. So, yeah, the more, and that's a good example. The more, the more efficient we can make that transportation as people are passing through Joplin, the less, idle time, et cetera, the better off we'll be trying to get people to carpool. If you have a lot of students coming from, northeast Oklahoma, the idea is to try to get as many of them to carpool to campus rather than to everybody drive their own car.
And then like we saw in some of the public service announcements, that those things that you do, carpooling, you're saving your money on gas, or the people who are updating their appliances, they're saving, ultimately, it's a dollar and cent
and that is a very good point to make. I mean, many of the things that you'll see on our PSAs are actually things that save you money, whether it's, be more efficient in your planning of your trips around town, don't use as much fuel, have you keep your car tuned up, the tires air properly, Many of the things that we're talking about asking people to do, turn the thermostat up a degree or two in the hot summer days, those are things that actually save you money as well. So they're smart things to do, and by the way, they just happen to help the environment.
So win-win, win-win situation.
Right.
So, if someone today who's watching has questions, you recommend they contact you, go to your website, what follow up?
The first thing I would suggest is go to the summerair.org website. That's the first place to start. If you have questions beyond that, there's a way to contact us through the website, or you can call my office, at the health department, the Joplin Health Department, and be happy to try to help you with any of your questions. But the first place probably to go to is the website.
Check out the website. All right. Well, Dan, thank you very much for visiting with us today, sharing some information with our audience. You're welcome. And I'd like to thank you for joining us this week on Newsmakers as we found out about this concern that is in Joplin region and will continue to be, and what you can do to play a role in helping us out. I'm Judy Stiles. Hope you can join me again next week for the same time on this station. We'll see you then.